There's a quote from A Course in Miracles that I would like to unpack with you today. Once I fully grasped what it meant, a whole lot of puzzle pieces fit together for me, so here it is. Quote, "A desert is a desert is a desert. You can do anything you want in it, but you cannot change it from what it is. It still lacks water, which is why it is a desert. The thing to do with a desert is to leave." End quote. The reason I'm bringing this quote up today is because it's a correction for an error that often gets made after one hears things like what I shared in my last presentation. Namely, I shared that all perception is projection. Remember I said that the ego has a use for everything the Holy Spirit creates? The ego has a way of making us feel guilty once we recognize that the world we see is a projection of our thoughts. It makes us feel guilty for all the thoughts we've previously thunk. Now let's return to the quote. If you're in a desert with a bunch of friends and you want to leave, does arguing about whose fault it is that you're in the desert help lead you out of the desert? No, it just prolongs the time you'll spend in the desert. The only right thing to do in this situation is acknowledge that presently I am in a desert. If I'm alone in the desert and I'm racked with guilty thoughts about how I got myself here, does that help me to leave? My spirit is diminished in that I am not experiencing the joy and peace that I would rather be experiencing. By first acknowledging that I have placed myself in this desert by believing this desert is real, now if I want to leave this desert, I must deny that it is real. There's the solution to my one and only problem. The ego will tempt me at this point to focus on my previous mistake, and I will beat myself up for not figuring this simple solution out 2 years ago or 10 years ago, or 40 years ago, when I could be relaxing into the happy truth that I was wrong about everything. To even consider these thoughts, I must be making the desert real right now. Remember the tiny mad idea that I introduced as the genesis of the ego and of this world. Quote, "Into eternity, where all is one, there crept a tiny mad idea at which the Son of God remembered not to laugh. In his forgetting did the thought become a serious idea, impossible of both accomplishment and real effects. The instant that the madness of the cause is recognized, it can have no effects. Together we can laugh them both away and understand that time cannot intrude upon eternity." End quote. The only real moment in time is right now. Name a time you have experienced in the past that wasn't right now when you experienced it. The suggestions that I in A Course in Miracles are making are to be applied to the right now. Jesus is not asking you to go back into the past and correct all your errors from before, because you really can't travel through time as of yet. We haven't developed the technology. In your thoughts, don't go back into the past at all, because when you do, you make the past real. And since it's full of uncorrectable errors, it will only induce feelings of guilt. Whenever you look upon your past, the only thing to do is to forgive it as an illusion. Here's a much longer quote from A Course in Miracles than I usually share. Please listen carefully and try to understand the logic of it. Quote, "The ego has a very strange notion of time, and it is with this notion that the questioning might well begin. The ego invests heavily in the past, and in the end believes that the past is the only aspect of time that is meaningful. You will remember that we said its emphasis on guilt enables it to ensure its continuity by making the future like the past, and thus avoiding the present. By the notion of paying for the past in the future, the past becomes the determiner of the future, making them continuous without an intervening present. For the ego uses the present only as a brief transition to the future, in which it brings the past to the future by interpreting the present in past terms. Now has no meaning to the ego. The present merely reminds it of past hurts, and it reacts to the present as if it were past. For the ego cannot tolerate release from the past, and though it is no more, it tries to preserve its image by responding as if it were present. Thus it dictates reactions to those you meet now from a past reference point, obscuring their present reality. In effect, if you follow its dictates, you will react to your brothers as though they were someone else, and this will surely prevent you from perceiving them as they are. And you will receive messages from them out of your own past, because by making it real in the present, you are forbidding yourself to let it go. You thus deny yourself the message of release that every brother offers you now." End quote. We correct this by first acknowledging that we are making this same error right now. Yes, we're in a desert of our own making. Quote, "You may ask how the mind could ever have made the ego. This is a perfectly reasonable question, in fact, the best question you could ask. There is no point in giving a historical answer because the past does not matter in human terms, and history would not exist if the same errors were not being repeated in the present." End quote. No one asleep and dreaming in the world remembers his attack upon himself. No one believes there really was a time when he knew nothing of a body and could never have conceived this world as real. He would have seen at once that these ideas are one illusion, too ridiculous for anything but to be laughed away. How serious they now appear to be, and no one can remember when they would have met with laughter and with disbelief. We can remember this if we look directly at their cause, and we will see the grounds for laughter, not a cause for fear. Let us return the dream he gave away unto the dreamer, who perceives the dream as separate from himself and done to him." End quote. When we're lost in the desert, the image of water in the distance is referred to as a mirage, meaning it's a hallucination or a trick of perception. Jesus is telling us the desert itself is a mirage, and that denying our belief in it is the quickest way out. You can try all sorts of alternate plans while you're here, and see for yourself they don't remove you from the desert. Eventually and inevitably, Jesus says, you will discover the way out of this desert is as simple as denying the desert is real. Thanks for being with me here today.